Some writers leave behind stories, others leave behind pieces of themselves. But she transformed pain, ambition, love, and despair into poetry that still echoes across generations. Her art fused lyric precision with themes of depression, identity, and womanhood. Brilliant, gifted, and deeply complex, she became one of the most influential literary voices of the 20th century. From a young age, she showed extraordinary talent. She loved words, stories, and poetry. Known for the Belgia, the Colossus, and the posthumous Ariel, she was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 1982 for the collected poems, making her the fourth person to receive this honor posthumously. By the age of 8, her first poem had already been published, but her childhood was also marked by loss. Her name is Sylvia Plath, born on October 27, 1932, in Boston, Massachusetts. When Sylvia was only 8 years old, her father died. The grief deeply affected her, reinforced her fear of abandonment, and will later influence much of her writing. She was so worried about it that she wrote a contract for her mother to sign, making her promise never to remarry. Sylvia excelled academically and earned a scholarship to Smith College. By the time she arrived at Smith College, she had written over 50 short stories and her work had been published in numerous magazines. At Smith, she majored in English literature and won all the major prizes in writing and scholarship, including literary prizes for her poetry. Additionally, she received a summer editor position at the young women's magazine Mademoiselle. On her graduation in 1952, she won the Glasgow Prize for her poem Two Lovers and a Beachcomber by the Real Sea. She was admired for her intelligence, discipline, and ambition. Friends described her as energetic and thrilling. But beneath the success, she struggled with intense pressure and emotional pain. She suffered a lifelong battle with severe depression, often characterized as a bipolar type illness, leading to multiple traumatic treatments with early modal electroconvulsive therapy, also known as ACT. Following ACT for depression, she made her first medically documented suicide attempt on August 24, 1953, by crawling under the front porch and taking her mother's sleeping pills. She survived this first suicide attempt, later writing that she blissfully succumbed to the wailing blackness and honestly believed was eternal oblivion. She spent the next 6 months in psychiatric care receiving more electric and insulin shock treatment. After recovering, Sylvia earned a scholarship to the University of Cambridge. There she met poet Ted Hughes on February 25, 1956 at a party to launch a poetry journal. Their relationship became one of literature's most famous and complicated love stories. She married fellow poet Ted Hughes in June 16, 1956 in London. In 1957, they briefly moved to the United States but moved back to England in the winter of 1959. They had their first daughter in 1960, and the following year she had her second pregnancy, which ended in miscarriage. Several of her poems, including Parliament Hill Fields, addresses this event. Letters written by Sylvia to her therapist, Dr. Ruth Benhouse, reveal allegations that her husband was physically abusive and he beat her 2 days before the miscarriage. They had two children. Frida and Nicholas was born on January 17, 1962. On the same year Nicholas was born, Sylvia discovered her husband's affairs with Asia Wavell, one of their close friends, and this eventually led to them separating in 1962. Encouraged by Robert Lowell and Anne Sexton, she began to write from her personal experience. During the early 1960s, Sylvia entered the most powerful creative period of her life. Her poems explored death, identity, anger, motherhood, and rebirth. And in October, she published The Colossus, her first collection of poetry. In the beginning of October 1963, she experienced a great burst of creativity and composed most of the poems on which her reputation now rests, writing at least 26 of the poems of her second collection, Ariel, which would be published posthumously. The winter of 1962 and 1963 was one of the coldest on record in the UK. The pipes froze, the children were often sick, and the house had no telephone. Her depression returned, but she kept on writing poetry, which would be published after her death. Her only novel, The Bell Jar, was published in January 1963 under a pseudonym. The novel explored mental illness, societal pressure, and the search for identity. They called the book disappointing, juvenile, and overwrought. While she did find a British publisher for it, she struggled to find an American publisher, with one telling her we didn't feel that we had managed to use the materials successfully in a novelistic way. Ouch. The reception for the bird jar was definitely not what Sylvia was hoping for. The book received mostly apathetic reviews, and she was disappointed at being passed over. Today, The Bell Jar is considered a modern literary classic. By the winter of 1963, Sylvia faced emotional struggles, financial stress, and the breakdown of her marriage. While for most of the time she had been able to continue working, her depression had worsened and became severe. Marked by constant agitation, suicidal thoughts, and inability to cope with daily life, she struggled with insomnia, taking medication at night to induce sleep, and frequently woke up early, losing at least 20 pounds in a short time. However, she continued to take care of her physical appearance and did not outwardly speak of feeling guilty or unworthy. Despite these hardships, she continued writing some of her greatest poems. On February 11, 1963, Sylvia's live-in nurse was due to arrive at 9 in the morning to help with the care of her children. Upon arrival, she could not get into the flat but eventually gained access with the help of a workman. They found Sylvia dead with her head on the oven door, having sealed the kitchen door and the room upstairs with her sleeping children inside with tape, towels, and clothes. Sylvia Plath died at the age of 30. Her husband, Ted Hughes, experienced tragedy for a second time when his mistress, Asia Weaver, for whom he left Sylvia, killed herself in a way that was similar to Sylvia. Unlike Sylvia, who left food and water for her children and ensured they were safely in their room, Asia gave her 4-year-old daughter sleeping pills before taking some herself, turned on the gas stove, lay down with her on a bed she dragged into the kitchen, and waited to die. After Sylvia's death, her reputation grew worldwide. She became an important figure in literature, feminism, and discussions about mental health. Sylvia Plath wrote with a voice that refused to hide pain, fear, or truth. Though her life was tragically short, her words achieved immortality.